Welcome to Builder Nation Procurement Edition. We are exploring how hardware startups tackle the essentials of procurement, from sourcing components to managing supply chains and controlling costs. Keep watching to hear real-world strategies from industry leaders and overcoming procurement challenges to bring impactful products to market faster. Today, we are joined by Ryan Walsh, Founder and CEO at Valqari. Welcome again, Ryan. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me.
So just to the people that didn't watch the previous interview with you, present yourself, tell us something about you real quick.
I'm Ryan Walsh. I'm the CEO and founder of Valqari. We build autonomous point-to-point drone systems like the one over my shoulder to provide logistics and last mile deliveries for different industries, particularly medical.
Yeah, perfect. So now that we have this procurement edition, can you give us like a high level view of the current procurement challenges in the industry of hardware?
Yeah, so especially when you're dealing with a system like ours that has a number of different motors, electronic components, large aluminum and steel pieces, it becomes a pretty significant BOM, and there's a pretty significant supply chain that goes with it. And so being able to meet customer deadlines and different milestones, all that sourcing becomes very critical to the end result.
Yeah, that's totally true. I agree with you about that. And from your perspective, now that you have Valqari since 2017, what do you think are the key differences in procurement approaches between the startups and large established companies?
The biggest factor, I would say, is scale. So when we started Valqari, I was in my garage, and you're building one prototype, two prototypes, and sourcing for that, while it can be more expensive per unit, is relatively easy. We were buying a lot of our stuff on Amazon just because we were buying in relatively low quantities. And when you go to 10 units or bigger, right, you start having to go to specialty sources and providers, and it becomes a very different challenge of where to get that amount for a cost-effective price at that volume. And so it's almost opposite sides of the coin when you get into more sizable procurement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. And now that you talk about the challenge that you had, what is the most significant challenge, decision that you had to take about procurement, about supply chain during all these years?
So because a lot of our product was trial and error and doing a lot of testing over the years before we got to a unit we were really happy with providing to a customer. For instance, we went and got a bunch of wire harnesses built for our last generation, and then we found out we had to do some changes to our motors and motor drivers. And so all of those wire harnesses that we had just spent all this money on no longer worked for this new one. And so we either have to retrofit them or spend money getting all new wire harnesses. And so your potential for sunk costs and your potential for kind of runaway budgets is pretty significant if you're not actively involved in your procurement.
Yeah, that's true. I think that when you start to grow, when you start to build your company, you start to have more challenges. You have to face with difficulties during all this journey.
Yep.
Yeah, I totally understand that. And can you walk us through, now that we are talking about procurement and supply chain, but you are also the founder and the CEO of Valqari. So could you walk us through the Valqari journey in building the first product, and how did procurement play a role in that?
Yeah, so we started building our first prototype in 2017, and it was very similar to a single family home mailbox, just with the addition of a drone delivery capability. And what we found was a lot of our initial hypotheses were correct, but a lot of the details and how to get there weren't. And so, we tested that one for about a year and then started over with a new one, taking those lessons learned, but again, still at the mailbox, single family home mailbox size. And we spoke to a lot of customers during that phase, and a lot of feedback on what are you looking for? And that led us to the larger one that you see over my shoulder. And so going from product to product, but more importantly, accepting the failures of each one and trying to correct those each time was one of the bigger challenges that we ran into. Hardware is definitely not for the faint of heart.
Yeah, I totally agree. And the procurement, what role play during all the time?
So again, when we were starting with those first prototypes, you're buying in such small quantities that it almost seems like procurement won't be an issue. As soon as you start buying parts in 50 and 100, and you bring outside players in and different team members, everybody has their say. And so that's important because it helps you see a bigger picture with procurement and different sourcing. But at the same time, there's a lot of hands that start getting into it, and tracking that is probably one of the most critical steps, because whether it's over ordering, under ordering, even shrinkage, right? I mean, there's all kinds of things that need to be accounted for so your budgets and so your books aren't off. We've run into issues where if the inventory controls aren't accurate and you think you have a part that you don't have, I mean, that ends up being disastrous when you're trying to do a demo for a customer or a big product showcase, right? And so those little foundational pieces, the building blocks and the basics of just tracking your inventory are very critical in building that foundation to success.
Yeah, and I want to stick with what you mentioned about the inventory, the budget. You use a specific tool or a software or something to control that, to manage the budget, to control the cost, something?
We're in the process of integrating those systems. There's a number of great systems out there, but what we found is, you start almost doing it on the back of an envelope when you're in your garage, right? And then you move to a spreadsheet when you're, building 2 or 3 products. And then, now we're at the point where we're starting to hit that scale where we need a enterprise level system. And so my team and I have actually been going through the past few weeks and really locking into what that next one's going to be. So we've got a few ideas, but always happy to have suggestions if anybody's out there.
Yeah, sure, because I think that you need these kind of tools to help your work, and you can just focus on the other things to develop the product, to I don't know, to improve the product too.
Exactly. And if you don't have proper inventory controls, it can take over your life real quick with the problems and the emergencies that come out of it. But a good inventory control system really just operates in the background and shouldn't be a major focus point. It should just be working in the background smoothly and everybody knows how to use it. But that's always a challenge, just getting to that step, right?
Yeah, that's totally true. And now that we are talking about these procurement tools, strategies, what advice would you give to the startups who are just starting to build their procurement strategies?
Start sooner rather than later, because by the time you need it, it's almost too late. And if you need it, you're under a deadline most of the time anyway. And so trying to meet that deadline and implement inventory control system is a very daunting task. So the sooner you can start with proper inventory controls, proper sign-outs, proper handoffs, the easier life is later on.
Yeah, I think that that's really important also for a company. Not matter if you are just have a startup, you just have to start with everything right away.
Yep.
Yeah. And to finish with this interview, what do you think are the most common procurement pitfalls that people need to avoid?
I think going and trying to backfill systems, at least in my experience, that's the most challenging thing I've run into, like in the situation I just described, where you might be implementing a new system or an enterprise level system just a bit later than you should have, and it becomes somewhat of a challenge tracking everything down and quantifying it and storing it and all the things you need to do properly to get that enterprise level system in place. So I would say that building it early and being very deliberate is the most important thing, and don't follow what I did and wait a little longer than you should have in some cases.
Yeah, I think it's really important, as we already talked about that. And thank you so much, Ryan, for these advices, for sharing your ideas about procurement and supply chain. I think they are really helpful for everybody that is going to be watch this interview. So thank you again for being here. And you have any social media or website you would like to share?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. You can check us out at valqari.com, or you can find Valqari or I on LinkedIn.
Yeah, and for everybody that is watching, be sure to visit our website, buildernation.io. You can also connect with us on LinkedIn by following Builder Nation for the latest updates and exclusive content. Thank you all for being part of this amazing community. We will see you in the next episode. And thanks again to Ryan for joining us today one more time.
Thanks for having me.